I'm Anna Mercer, and I'm 33 years old. Last week, my father called me to talk about his upcoming celebration dinner for making senior partner. The dinner was set for a private dining room at the Colonnade, a premier hotel in Boston's Back Bay, with all 19 of the firm's top executives and partners attending. He had that classic East Coast elite arrogance in his voice when he said, "Come by yourself. Your electrician husband doesn't really belong at a table full of corporate executives." Without hesitation, I said, "If he doesn't belong, then neither do I." Then I hung up. That exact same night, my sister Rachel sent me a video she had taken from inside the dinner. The camera was shaking violently, but in the clip, Alexander Hartfield, the managing partner of my father's firm, stood up, pointed across the room, and demanded in a booming voice, "Lawrence, your son-in-law. Is he the one who?" And the video cut off right there. Rachel immediately texted me, "You have to see the rest of this. Call me right now." I didn't call her back. I didn't need to, because I already knew the secret my father was completely blind to. For 8 long months, his consulting firm had been desperately pursuing a mysterious patent holder. This single individual was refusing to license the core technology that my father's entire promotion hinged upon. They didn't know his name, and until that very night, they had no idea who he actually was. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to June 7, 2023. 2 major things happened that day. At 3:42 p.m., my mother, Elizabeth Mercer, passed away after an 11-month battle with cancer. And sometime that exact same morning, the patent my husband Nate had applied for was officially approved by the USPTO. Though we didn't even check the mail until a week later. The timing felt almost cruel, as if the universe took away the most precious thing in your life, and, in the very same breath, shoved an unexpected gift into someone else's hands. Because of that, neither of us could fully process how we were supposed to feel. 3 days later, my father stood at my mother's memorial service, thanking every single guest. He shook hands, accepted condolences, and remained perfectly composed. Lawrence Mercer, a senior partner at Hartfield & Klein Consulting, was a man who had spent 30 years mastering corporate professionalism in Boston. He was not about to lose his composure in front of 200 people. At the reception, he found Nate, shook his hand, and said, "Thank you for taking care of my daughter." That was the last polite thing he ever said to my husband. I didn't notice the shift right away. Grief has a way of occupying every corner of your mind, leaving you with zero energy to notice the subtle toxicity creeping in through the cracks. My mother had always been the bridge between my father's cold logic and his remaining humanity. She softened his harsh edges and translated his blunt, hurtful remarks into something that sounded like care. Without her, those edges were fully exposed, and they were razor-sharp. 2 months after the funeral, in August 2023, we had a family dinner at my father's single-family home in Cambridge. Rachel was there too. It was our first time gathering as a family since the service. Nate mentioned a project he was working on, an electrical system overhaul for a hospital in Boston. It involved a complex panel upgrade, very challenging, but progressing smoothly. My father looked at him, gave a slight nod, and coldly said, "That's nice." Then he immediately turned to me. "Anna, how is your commercial copywriting business going?" It was as if Nate hadn't spoken at all. I answered my father's question because I didn't know what else to do. Rachel looked at me from across the table, and I could see the question in her eyes. Did that really just happen? Yes, it did. And it quickly became a pattern. November 2023, Thanksgiving. At my father's house, he spent 40 minutes rambling about a major client project his firm was handling, energy consulting for a massive retail chain. His talk was packed with corporate jargon like enterprise strategy, implementation hurdles, and market analysis. Nate tried to join the conversation. For years, he had been dealing with energy efficiency in commercial buildings. The moment he started to mention a pattern he'd noticed in commercial HVAC systems, My father cut him off entirely. The complexity here is strictly at the corporate strategy level, not down at the basic field implementation level. Then he immediately turned to Rachel. How is your consulting work coming along? Nate went silent. I watched the expression on his face completely shut down. It wasn't anger. It was a total withdrawal. It was like he decided that if there was no seat for him in the conversation, he wasn't going to waste his breath trying to take one. I wanted to say something, to defend him, to force father to listen, but what could I say? Dad, you're being rude? He'd just deny it. He'd claim he was just having a normal conversation, making me out to be dramatic and overreacting. So, I said nothing. December 2023, Christmas. My father gave Rachel an expensive handcrafted leather briefcase. He gave me a gift card to Anthropologie, and he gave Nate a $50 gift card to Home Depot. For your work? He said with a subtle smile. Nate thanked him, slipped the card into his wallet, and never mentioned it again. That gift card sat in our kitchen drawer for weeks. $50. Given to a man who ran his own electrical contracting business, making $85,000 a year. A man who spent 4 years grinding at MIT, earned a degree in electrical engineering, and chose to become a hands-on electrician simply because he preferred building physical systems over sitting in an office designing things he'd never see built. Of course, my father didn't know any of that, because he never bothered to ask. March 2024, my father's birthday dinner at an upscale restaurant in Back Bay. 15 people were there, amongst a family and his colleagues. One of his partners, a man named Thomas Brennan, asked Nate where he went to college. Nate said, MIT. Thomas looked genuinely impressed. Oh, fantastic! What was your major? Electrical engineering, class of 2010. My father chimed in right at that moment. Oh, did you take some continuing education courses there? They have some great short-term programs for tradespeople. Nate's expression didn't change at all. No, I did the 4-year undergraduate program. I earned my Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. My father blinked hard. Well, that's nice. In less than 30 seconds, he awkwardly forced a topic change, launching into a workplace case study and completely dropping any mention of MIT. I kept waiting for him to bring it up later, to acknowledge it, or to show even a shred of curiosity about why a man with an MIT engineering degree chose to work as an electrician. But he never did. That was the exact moment I realized. My father didn't forget. He was actively ignoring it. There's a massive difference. Forgetting is passive, but ignoring is a conscious choice. Fast forward to Easter 2025. We were back at my father's house. I made the mistake of hoping things might get better, but nothing had changed. My father brought up Rachel's boyfriend, a junior associate at a mid-sized law firm, who was pushing to make partner. Now that is a career path worth celebrating, he said. He looked me straight in the eye and said it right in front of Nate, as if Nate sitting 3 feet away was entirely invisible. I couldn't help pushing back. Nate's company just won the contract for the downtown medical center renovation. That's a $2 million project. My father chuckled softly. That's a project for his company, Anna, not for him, personally. He's the master electrician on it, I said through gritted teeth. He put his heart and soul into that bid. Of course. I'm sure he's very skilled in his little line of work. It was the tone. That's what truly stung. It wasn't just the words, but that patronizing tone, like he was complimenting a toddler on a finger painting. Later on the drive home, Nate said to me, "Your father is always going to see me as just a blue-collar worker. It's fine. I don't need his validation." I said, "But I need him to actually see you." He asked, "Why?" And I didn't have an answer. October 2025, Sunday dinner. My father was in high spirits. Lately, he'd been talking non-stop about his work, specifically his firm's new strategy in energy consulting. We're consulting for a major national retailer aiming to slash energy costs across 800 stores nationwide, he said. The absolute hardest part is retrofitting the old systems without completely replacing the existing setups. It is insanely complex, top-tier engineering. Nate raised his eyes from his plate. My father kept going. These are high-level enterprise challenges. Not the kind of stuff you run into doing residential wiring, Nate said calmly. I do commercial work, not residential. Arch. Right. My father brushed him off casually and launched back into his speech. Nate didn't try to interrupt again. Sitting at that table, it suddenly hit me. For months, my father had been talking about energy efficiency, retail clients, and HVAC optimization. Every single detail aligned directly with Nate's core expertise. This was the exact work Nate had been doing for years. Yet my father hadn't asked for Nate's perspective even once. Not a single time. Later in the car, I asked Nate, could you solve that problem for his retail chain client? He was quiet for a moment, then said, I already did. I patented the solution back in 2021. Are we going to tell your dad? Why shouldn't we? He won't care unless he absolutely has to. I didn't fully understand what he meant back then, but I do now. A Tuesday night in November 2025. The two of us were eating leftover pasta at home, nothing out of the ordinary. Nate casually brought up that since July, he had been negotiating a patent license with a consulting firm. I casually asked, which firm? He said Hartfield & Klein. I set my fork down immediately. That was my father's firm. Nate nodded. I know. It wasn't until a second Zoom call in October when I saw the corporate header on a shared document that I put two and two together. My heart rate spiked. Does Dad know it's you? No. They've been negotiating through an intermediary law firm, Carter & Associates. They never asked if I had a personal connection to anyone at Hartfield & Klein. On their paperwork, I'm just listed as Nathan Brooks, sole inventor, licensed electrician in Massachusetts. That's all the information they have. I stared at him. Should I tell him? Why would you? Because it's his firm, and this could directly impact his standing there. Nate leaned back in his chair. Anna, for 8 years, your father has never once asked about my work. Not once. If I tell him now, what happens? Either he tries to use family to pressure me into agreeing to terrible terms, or he accuses me of trying to extort them using our connection. I prefer to keep business and family separate. What if it all comes out? Then it comes out. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just not broadcasting it. If Hartfield & Klein wants to license my patent, they have to meet my safety and implementation standards. Being related doesn't change that. I asked what they were offering. He said, they want an unlimited, perpetual license, and they're refusing to accept my oversight on implementation. They want to hire the cheapest third-party subcontractors nationwide to maximize their profit margin per installation. I keep turning them down. How long has this been dragged out? 5 months now since July. They've sent 6 term sheets, and I've rejected every single one. Does Dad know about the negotiations? I have no idea. They're running it through their energy practice division. Your dad might be involved, or he might not. I don't ask, and they don't tell me who's on their internal team. I sat in the kitchen, processing everything. My father's firm had been locked in a months-long standoff with my husband over a high-stakes account, and neither of them had any idea who was on the other side of the table. I could have told my father. I could have sent him an email that very night saying, Dad, just so you know, the patent owner your firm is trying to deal with is Nate. But I didn't. Not out of malice or strategic maneuvering, but out of sheer exhaustion. My father had spent 8 years actively choosing not to understand what Nate did. Why should I hand him information he had never valued or cared to learn? And honestly, Nate was right. Telling my father would only mess things up further. He'd think Nate was playing games, or that I was meddling in his corporate affairs, or that the whole thing was a setup. It was better to let events take their natural course. I asked Nate, what if they never agree to your terms? He said, then they don't get the patent, and their client doesn't get the energy savings they promised. That could seriously impact your father's career. I know, Nate said quietly, but I won't compromise on safety standards, not even for so-called family. Lying in bed that night, his words kept looping in my head, not even for so-called family. Arch. My father had spent years proving through his actions that Nate wasn't real family to him. Not the important kind of family. Not the kind invited to executive dinners, respected at birthday parties, or asked about his career. In my father's eyes, Nate was just an electrician. A background worker on the edge of his life. Arch. Someone you maintained basic politeness with, but never wasted genuine curiosity on. And now, without him realizing it, my father's lifetime career trajectory was hanging entirely on that electrician's signature. The absolute irony of it made me shudder. January 2026. My father called, his voice practically glowing with excitement. Arch. He was about to be promoted to managing partner of the energy consulting practice at Hartfield & Klein. It was the absolute pinnacle of his 30-year career, the one thing he had dreamed of achieving. I'm hosting a celebration dinner, he said. All the senior partners will be there. March 15th. You have to come. Of course, Dad, that's amazing. Congratulations. Arch. It's more than amazing. It's validation. 30 years of hard work. Anna, this is real success. I didn't ask what Nas meant by real success, because I already knew. He mentioned the dinner would be in a private room at the Colonnade. Only the absolute best venue for an occasion like this. I told him I was proud of him. And I was. Arch. Even then, after everything, a part of me still foolishly hoped we could get back to something that felt like a real family. He added, It'll be good for you too. You can see what actual success looks like at this level. There it was again. The subtle jab. This is true achievement. Not like your husband climbing around construction sites. This. I should have seen what was coming next. Arch. Sunday, March 8th, 2026. Just after 6 p.m., the phone rang. I was working on a document for a client. Nate was still out at a job site in Cambridge. When I answered, my father sounded exceptionally pleased. Anna, I wanted to confirm the details for the dinner. March 15th, 7 p.m., the Colonnade. Black tie required. Sounds great, Dad. It will be. All 19 senior partners are attending. Arch. Even Alexander Hartfield himself will be there. This is the moment I've worked my entire life for. I'm happy for you. I want you there, Anna. It means a lot to me for you to see this. Of course. Nate and I will. He cut me off. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I think it would be best if you came alone. The statement hung frozen in the air. Arch. I wondered if I had heard him correctly. I'm sorry. What did you say? This is a professional corporate event, he said. People will be discussing high-level matters. Your electrician husband would feel completely out of place there. Frankly, I don't want to spend the entire evening explaining to my colleagues why he's at the table. Arch. Through the window, I saw Nate's work truck pulling into the driveway. He was home early. I had about 30 seconds to figure out how to end this conversation. Let me make sure I understand you completely. My voice turned cold as ice. You are uninviting my husband from your celebration dinner because you feel embarrassed by his job? Anna, I'm thinking of Nathan here. Arch. When we're discussing corporate energy markets, consulting strategies, and client relations, he's just going to sit there awkwardly. He can't contribute to the conversation, and that's uncomfortable for him. You've never once asked what he could contribute. I know what electricians do, Anna. They are skilled trade workers, and I respect that. But these are completely different worlds. Arch. You mean your world. I mean the professional world. A world of people who have spent decades building high-level expertise in business strategy. Nate spent 4 years at MIT, building high-level expertise in electrical engineering. Then he chose field implementation. That was his choice. Be that as it may, it doesn't give him a seat at this table. Arch. I heard Nate's key turn in the front door lock. I had to end this before he walked in and saw me falling apart. I hope you understand, my father said. This is my defining moment. I want you there to celebrate with me, but I need you to come by yourself. I took a deep breath. If he doesn't belong, then neither do I. Dead silence. 3 whole seconds of nothing. Porch. Then he spoke. Anna, think carefully about what you're saying. I've been thinking about this for 3 years. I've watched you ignore my husband. I've watched you dismiss him, talk over him, and treat him like he's beneath you. I kept quiet because I held on to this foolish hope that you'd change. I haven't ignored anyone. I've always been polite to Nathan. Politeness isn't respect. Porch. You've never asked about his career. You've never asked about his education, and you've never treated him as an equal. Because he is not my peer, Anna. He is a blue-collar trade worker. I am a managing partner at a corporate firm. Those positions are simply not equivalent in society. Nate walked in right then, seeing my back turned as I held the phone. Porch. My face must have given everything away, because he silently mouthed, "Your dad?" I nodded. "You're right," I said into the phone. "You aren't peers. Nate actually creates and builds real things. You just sit around talking about them to make money." My father's voice spiked. "If you skip this dinner, you are telling me that your husband matters more to you than your own father." Porch. Nate is my family, I snapped. You're the one who keeps forgetting that. If he's not invited, I'm not coming. I hung up. Nate set down his tool bag. What happened? I told him everything. The dinner, the invitation, the exclusion, and every single word my father had said. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "It's okay if I don't go to his dinner, Anna." Porch. I wasn't expecting an invitation anyway. That's not the point. Tears almost spilled over. The point is he's treated you like a second-class citizen for 8 years, and I am done pretending it's okay. What did you tell him? That if you aren't on the guest list, I will never step foot in that place. Nate looked at me intently for a long moment. He's going to be furious, he said. Porch. Good, I replied. You know he's never going to apologize, right? I know, I wiped my eyes. And I'm done waiting for him to change. I'm just changing what I'm willing to tolerate. 2 hours later, Rachel called. Dad called me, and he is losing his mind. He asked me to talk sense into you. I'm not changing my mind. I know. Porch. But Anna, are you seriously going to blow up your relationship with him over this? I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. Rachel was always stuck in the middle. Rachel, he uninvited Nate because he's ashamed of him. I know it's wrong, but Dad isn't going to change. If you don't go, he will hold this against you forever. He already blames me for everything anyway. Porch. I married the wrong guy. I chose the wrong career. I failed to live up to Mom's expectations. Nothing I do is ever enough for him. That's not fair. Forcing me to choose between his approval and my husband's dignity isn't fair either. Silence on the line. So what do you want me to do? Rachel asked. Nothing. Go to the dinner. Celebrate with Dad. I don't expect you to fight my battle. Porch. So you're just going to stand alone on this? Rachel said softly. If Mom were alive, I said, she would have gone to that dinner and made Dad feel miserable the entire night. Or she would have called him an arrogant jerk to his face and refused to show up. We both knew I was right. Before hanging up, Rachel suddenly lowered her voice. If something happens at the dinner, Porch, something Dad doesn't see coming, I'll let you know. I didn't understand what she meant by that at the time. Wednesday, March 11th. I received an email from my father. Subject line, details for March 15th dinner. The body was strictly administrative logistics. 6:30 p.m. cocktails. 7 p.m. sharp dinner, formal business attire, valet parking provided. Porch. At the bottom he wrote, I look forward to celebrating this milestone with you, Dad. His email signature had already been updated to the new title he spent 30 years chasing. Hartfield and Klein, Energy Practice, Managing Partner. That title he was so proud of. The title dependent on technology he had no idea belonged to the very man he had just humiliated and excluded. Porch. I typed out 3 different replies and deleted them all. Finally, I wrote, I will not be attending. Hope your celebration dinner goes well. I hit send at 11:47 p.m. Thursday, March 12th, my father called immediately. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail. Anna, I am deeply disappointed. I thought you would reconsider. This is a monumental moment in my career, and I wanted to share it with you. Orch. But if you'd rather prove some point than support your father, that is your choice. I gave you the chance to be part of something meaningful. If your mother were here, she would understand the importance of tonight. She would be proud of me. I'm sorry you choose to put other relationships above your family. I hope you change your mind before Saturday. Orch. If not, I have to accept that you've made your priorities very clear. I listened to the voicemail twice, then played it for Nate. He's using your mother to guilt trip you, Nate said. I know, I said. Is it working? Not anymore. Friday, March 13th. Rachel called again. Dad wants me to take a bunch of photos at the dinner tonight. Orch. He said he wants to send them to you so you see what you missed. Are you sure you... I don't know. Let him do whatever he wants. He's still my dad. I get it. Anna, I really wish Mom were here. Me too. She'd know how to handle him. She'd tell him he was acting like a controlling jerk and demand he apologize immediately. Rachel laughed, though it sounded like she was on the verge of tears. Orch. Then she repeated, if anything goes down at the dinner, anything Dad doesn't expect, I'll keep my eyes open, I said. Okay. Still not thinking much of it. Saturday, March 15th, 2026. Dinner day. Nate and I had a completely normal weekend morning. Hit to the farmer's market, did laundry. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen, and I kept working on my client projects. Orch. It felt entirely grounded. My phone buzzed 11 times throughout the day. By noon, I just turned off notifications altogether. At 5:30 p.m., Nate asked if I wanted to grab dinner. Just the two of us, somewhere nice but low-key. Somewhere we could just be ourselves. We drove over to Giuliano's in Beacon Hill. It's a tiny, family-owned Italian place we've been going to since 2018. Orch. The owner, Antonio, knows us by name. The food is incredible, fair prices, and best of all, nobody cares if Nate shows up in work boots with a bit of dust on them. We ordered at 6:45 p.m. At that exact moment, 4 miles away at the Colonnade, my father's lavish celebration was kicking off. Nate got pasta, I got fish. We talked about his week. Orch. The downtown medical center project was ahead of schedule, and his lead worker, Jeremy, was picking things up quickly. It was just simple, real conversation. The kind of conversation my father had failed to have with Nate for 8 years. How's the hospital job coming? I asked. Great. Ahead of schedule, which is practically a miracle in construction. How's your crew? Solid. Orch. Jeremy's picking things up fast. I'm thinking of letting him lead the next phase. That's awesome. Nate looked across the table at me. Are you doing okay? Yeah, just thought about your dad's dinner for a second. I paused. Actually, no, I was thinking, we're much better off right here. He smiled, reached across the table and took my hand. At 7:18 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Orch. Dinner started. Dad is practically glowing. All 19 partners showed up plus him. Huge crowd. I showed the text to Nate. He glanced at it, unfazed. I put the phone away. At 8:30 p.m., Antonio brought over tiramisu, saying it was on the house for my favorite couple. Our total bill was $48. 4 miles away, my father was dropping over $8,000 on a celebration I wasn't part of. Orch. At 8:47 p.m., another text from Rachel. Dad just took a toast. He gave a massive speech about the retail chain account. He looked so pleased with himself. I didn't reply. I just kept sharing dessert with my husband. The man my father decided wasn't worthy of sitting at an executive table. At 9:15 p.m., we left the restaurant, drove home, and turned on a movie. A totally ordinary Saturday night. Orch. At 9:32 p.m., my phone screen lit up sharply. A text from Rachel. Something happened, calling you right now. But the call didn't come through. Instead, 30 seconds later, a video file landed in my messaging app. A 48-second shaky phone recording. I pressed play. The quality was grainy. Rachel's hand was trembling badly, but I could clearly see the luxurious private dining room at the Colonnade. Orch. Mahogany wall paneling, glittering crystal chandeliers, and a meticulously set 20-person long table. My father was sitting at the head of the table, beaming with pride. Then, Alexander Hartfield stood up. The 68-year-old founder of Hartfield and Klein, with silver hair and razor-sharp eyes, spoke in a voice that effortlessly cut through the room's background chatter. Lawrence, I have to ask you something. Your daughter Anna. She's married to an electrician, right? The smile on my father's face didn't fade at all. Instead, it took on the smug tolerance of a successful executive. Yes, married 7 years now. What's your husband's name? Nathan. Nathan Brooks. Why do you ask, Alexander? The muscles in Alexander's face twitched slightly. A pause. He was rapidly calculating something in his head. What exactly does Nathan do? My father shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable discussing his blue-collar son-in-law in a setting like this. He's an electrician. Does some work on commercial buildings? A licensed electrician? Or an electrical engineer? I assume he's licensed. He handles wiring installations, that sort of thing. Does he have a degree? My father paused, trying to mask the subtle condescension in his tone. I think he mentioned MIT once. Probably some kind of continuing education or vocational training. Alexander stared at him, dead silent, for 3 full seconds. Then, measuring every word, he asked, Lawrence, is your son-in-law the Nathan Brooks who holds U.S. patent number 11,582,193? The expression on my father's face froze instantly, going completely blank. I'm sorry, I don't... What patent? The real-time load monitoring system for commercial HVAC setups. The single-core patent we've been desperately trying to license since last summer for the Atlantic Retail Project. My father's mouth opened slightly, looking like a fish gasped for air. I don't understand. My son-in-law is an electrician. He doesn't... How could he possibly hold a patent like that? Alexander's voice was unnaturally patient, but it was the kind of patience that precedes a storm. Lawrence, for 8 full months, we've been negotiating with a man named Nathan Brooks. Class of 2010, MIT Electrical Engineering, Massachusetts Master Electrician. Holds a patent specifically optimized for commercial HVAC systems. He's rejected every set of terms we've sent him unless we grant him strict implementation oversight. I've personally met with him twice over Zoom. Is this man your son-in-law or not? All the color drained completely from my father's face. He never mentioned a patent to me. Did you ever ask him? Alexander's counter-question landed like a sledgehammer. Dead silence. The other senior partners in the room began sensing that something was deeply wrong. Thomas Brennan leaned forward. Catherine Rowland turned around in her chair. Thomas couldn't help chiming in. Wait, Lawrence, your son-in-law is the Brooks we've been fighting tooth and nail to secure? My father looked completely lost. I don't understand what's happening here. Alexander pulled out his phone, opened an email, and slid the screen directly in front of my father. Because of the camera angle, I couldn't see what was on the screen, but I knew what it was. It was Nate's Zoom profile photo, the same professional headshot he used for business correspondence. Is this your son-in-law? My father stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing a few times, but no sound came out. Yes, Lawrence. That's the inventor we've been chasing for 8 months. The man holding the lifelines to the Atlantic Retail account. The man who holds the key to whether you sit in that managing partner chair today. My father jerked his head up, his face turning an ash gray. He never said a word. About the patent, about any of this, he didn't mention a single thing. Alexander stood there, motionless. Lawrence, where is your son-in-law tonight? He wasn't invited to your promotion dinner, was he? This was a professional business event, I thought. You thought? Alexander scoffed softly, his voice echoing through the wide dining room. You thought the man holding the core technology that determines whether you keep this job didn't belong at your celebration dinner? The long table went completely silent. 19 partners, every single pair of eyes, shining like searchlights pinned directly on my father. Sitting in the corner, James Whitmore asked quietly, Lawrence, do you even know why Brooks keeps rejecting our terms? My father shook his head mechanically. Because he doesn't trust us to implement his system correctly. He believes consulting firms cut corners for profit at the expense of safety standards. And you just kicked him out of your family dinner because you viewed him as a low-level trade worker. The video cut off right there. Rachel's phone memory had filled up mid-recording, but I had already seen more than enough. I sat on the sofa, the phone slipping onto my lap. Nate was sitting right next to me. He had watched the entire video over my shoulder. When did Alexander figure it out? He asked softly. Tonight. Just moments ago, he heard your name and connected all the dots. My phone rang. It was Rachel. I hit speakerphone. Rachel's voice was shaking from pure adrenaline. Did you watch it? Anna, did you know all along that Dad's entire promotion was hanging on Nate's patent? Nate leaned closer to the microphone. Hey, Rachel. Yes, we knew, I said. Since when? Nate answered. I knew Hartfield & Klein was trying to license it back in November. But I had no idea your dad's promotion was tied directly to it. And I certainly didn't expect things to blow up in such a dramatic way. Why didn't you guys tell Dad? Because he never asked, Nate said plainly. And I wanted to keep business negotiations completely separate from family dynamics. Rachel took a sharp breath. Anna, you have no idea what happened after the video cut off. What happened? Alexander pulled Dad out into the hallway for a private conversation. It lasted about 12 minutes. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard Alexander yelling, 8 months of negotiations, rejecting all terms and implementation standards. When they walked back into the room, Dad's hands were visibly shaking. He forced out a line about suddenly feeling unwell, and then he practically fled the venue. It's 10:15 p.m. now, and the partners are still here drinking. I'm hiding in the restroom. I literally heard Catherine Rowland say outside, Lawrence didn't even know his own son-in-law held the patent we desperately needed. And Thomas replied, clearly, he's never bothered to look his son-in-law in the eye his entire life. Nate sighed. Rachel, there are a few more things you should know. Over the next 20 minutes, Nate explained the full story to Rachel. The origins of the patent, which stemmed from a dangerous flaw he noticed while doing wiring work in several large commercial buildings. The HVAC systems were running inefficiently because they couldn't monitor load in real time, wasting massive amounts of energy and posing serious safety hazards. He spent 2 years developing a retrofit solution, applied for the patent in 2021 and got it approved in June 2023. The exact same month Mom passed away, Rachel said softly. Yes, I said, and Dad knew nothing about it. Because he never once bothered to ask. Rachel paused. What about the negotiations? Why do you keep turning them down? Nate's tone shifted into something firm and serious, like he was discussing voltage parameters. Hartfield & Klein wants an unrestricted license with 0 mandatory safety standards. They want to subcontract the installation work across 820 stores nationwide to the cheapest, most inexperienced crews just to maximize their margins. Between July and February, they submitted 6 drafts, and I rejected every single one. I kept telling them, my patent comes with strict implementation standards. If you want my system, you have to hire certified master electricians and follow my installation protocol to the letter. But they claimed that was too expensive and took too long. Rachel's voice dropped low. They wanted to take shortcuts. They wanted to maximize profit per store. How much would your standards add to the cost across 820 stores? $8,000 per store, $6.5 million total. They claimed that was commercially unacceptable. I thought you were just protecting your intellectual property, Rachel murmured. I'm protecting the integrity of the engineering, and more importantly, human lives. Nate's gaze turned resolute. In commercial buildings, cheap electrical installations actually end up harming people. Rachel asked, does this mean Dad's promotion is completely off the table? I don't know their internal politics, Nate replied. All I know is that without my patent license, they can't legally deliver the energy overhaul they promised Atlantic Retail, and I will never license my technology to a firm that puts profit margins over safety. Silence settled over both ends of the line. After a moment, Rachel asked in almost a whisper, "Does Dad know all of this now?" I said, "He knows now. Alexander laid it all out tonight." "Orch, what do you think Dad's going to do?" I was silent for a long time, long enough to hear the second hand ticking on the wall clock. "He's going to try and pin all of this on Nate, blaming Nate for ruining his career," I said. Rachel took a deep breath. "Anna, Dad is calling me right now. What am I supposed to say to him? Tell him the truth. Tell him I already know everything. Orch. Tell him that if he wants to talk to me, he needs to apologize first. Not about the patent, but for the 8 years he spent looking down on my husband with complete disrespect." Rachel hung up. Nate and I sat on the couch, sinking into a long, quiet pause. I thought he might feel angry, or maybe a sense of payback, or the satisfaction of a total victory. Orch. But when he turned to look at me, there was only deep sadness in his eyes. "How are you feeling right now?" I asked him. He thought it through carefully. "Sad." "Sad? Your father spent 8 years convinced I was just a low-level worker incapable of complex thought. He never asked about my work, never asked about my degree. Orch. He made patronizing assumptions based strictly on my job title, deciding I wasn't worth taking the time to know. And now the entire career he's so proud of hinges on whether the guy he deemed not worth knowing signs off on a licensing agreement." He paused, shaking his head slightly. "Anna, that's not justice. It's just deeply sad." Orch. "It's the consequences of his own actions," I said through gritted teeth. "Maybe so, but it doesn't make me feel any better. I never wanted to prove him wrong, and I have zero interest in rubbing his face in it. I just wanted to do my job, ensure safety, and be treated with basic respect." In that moment, I suddenly understood the difference between us. Orch. I was feeling the sharp satisfaction of long overdue vindication, while Nate was mourning a relationship that could have been decent. If my father had shown a little less arrogance and a little more curiosity, things never would have ended up here. "What are you going to do?" Nate asked me. "I'm drawing a line." I looked into his eyes, stating each word clearly. Orch. And this time I am not backing down. Sunday, March 16th, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my father on my phone. 6:47 a.m., 7:15 a.m., 8:02 a.m. Then came the barrage of text messages. 6:52 a.m. "We need to talk." 7:18 a.m. "This is critical. Call me back." 8:05 a.m. "Anna, I don't understand what happened last night. What Alexander said makes no sense. Orch, please call me back." 9:30 a.m. "I've been trying to reach you. It's urgent." 11:43 a.m. "Your husband has been negotiating with my firm and you didn't even bother to mention it to me." 2:15 p.m. "This directly impacts my career. I need to understand what's going on." 4:32 p.m. "You're being unfair. I deserve an explanation." I didn't open those texts until late in the evening. Orch. All through Sunday, Nate and I stuck to our usual routine, hitting the farmer's market, doing laundry. He fixed a loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet, and I took care of some client paperwork. Life went on. My phone buzzed 11 times, but I kept the notifications muted. At 8:47 p.m., I finally read through all 7 texts and passed the phone over to Nate. "Notice anything?" Orch. "Not a single word of apology," Nate remarked, scanning the screen. I noticed. "And he still hasn't asked a single thing about your work," I added with a bitter laugh. "The whole screen is just this impacts my career." Monday, March 17th. At 10:15 a.m., Rachel texted me. "Dad didn't go to work today. He called in sick. His assistant called me asking if something happened." Orch. In my entire life, I've never seen him take a sick day. Later that afternoon, Rachel texted again. "He's at home and he's not answering my calls either. Anna, I think he's breaking down. He keeps texting me asking how long I've known about Nate owning that patent. Finally, he asked if you're planning to cut him off forever." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't reply to Rachel right away. Orch. My mind drifted back to Mom's final days. When Elizabeth was battling for her life in the hospital, Lawrence didn't take a single sick day. He worked outside the chemotherapy unit, reviewed files in her room, and even during her final week in hospice, he still wore a suit to morning meetings. Yet now, facing a blow to his professional standing and complete humiliation in front of his peers, he was too rattled to even step into the office. That alone revealed where his true priorities had always been. At 7:20 p.m. on Monday evening, an email quietly landed in Nate's work inbox. The sender was Alexander Hartfield. Subject: Request for a meeting. Mr. Nathan Brooks. Dear Mr. Brooks. I hope this email finds you well. I am writing to request a direct meeting regarding potential licensing terms for U.S. patent number 11,582,193. I understand from our previous interactions through Carter and Associates that you maintain strict quality control standards regarding technical implementation. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss these concerns directly and explore whether mutually agreeable terms can be reached. I freely acknowledge that our prior proposals did not adequately address your requirements for engineering oversight. I am eager for the chance to present a revised approach. Please let me know if you might be available for a call this week. Best regards, Alexander Hartfield, founding partner. Hartfield and Klein. Nate showed me the email before drafting a response. You're still willing to work with them? I asked, surprised. I'm willing to work with anyone who wants to do the engineering right and stay compliant, Nate said calmly. Alexander isn't your father. He's a practical businessman, and right now he needs a solution. As long as he agrees to my safety standards, I'll grant the license. After everything, my patent isn't a weapon for personal payback. It's just a tool. What matters is that it gets implemented safely, he replied. Mr. Hartfield, thank you for reaching out directly. I am open to discussing licensing terms, provided that any final agreement includes legally binding implementation standards and certification requirements for installation personnel. I am available for a call this Thursday, March 20th, at 2 p.m. Sincerely, Nathan Brooks. That was Nate. Principled, never holding a grudge, standing firm without being aggressive. He didn't need to watch my father suffer. He just needed the project completed safely according to the standards he had set. Wednesday, March 19th. I received an email in my personal inbox from my father's personal Gmail account, lom1967@gmail.com, an address I hadn't seen him use since 2019. Anna, I need you to understand something. I genuinely had no knowledge of Nathan's patent. If I had known, things would have been entirely different. I have poured my entire career into building connections, trust, and reputation in the Boston business community. What happened at last Saturday's dinner threatens to tear all of that down. Alexander Hartfield has gone around me to contact Nathan directly, which is completely out of line. Nathan had an obligation to disclose his business dealings with my firm, and his concealment created a severe conflict of interest. As your father, I am asking you to talk to Nathan and convince him to license his patent to Hartfield and Klein under reasonable terms. This situation is severely impacting my standing at the firm and my credibility with the partners. I know you are upset with me. We can address that later. Right now, I need your help to resolve this career crisis. Dad, I read the email 3 times. With every read, the anger inside me burned hotter. I wasn't angry at the words on the screen, but at everything left unsaid. No apology for excluding Nate from the dinner. Not a shred of reflection on the 8 years of cold indifference and contempt he had shown him. He didn't even realize that his own complete lack of care, his arrogance, and his blindness had brought about this exact situation. The entire message boiled down to one thing: fix my career problem for me. I drafted 4 different replies and deleted them all. Finally, at 11:47 p.m., I typed out a few concise lines. Dad, Nate's decisions regarding his patent are entirely his own business matters, and I will never interfere. If you want to talk about our relationship as father and daughter, I am always open to that. but we will not be discussing Nate's work. Anna, Thursday, March 20th. Rachel called, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Dad wants me to act as a mediator. He wants me to set up a sit-down between you two so he can clear up the misunderstanding. Anna, what should I do? Do you want to mediate? No, I want to stay out of it. But he's still my dad. He's my dad too, and I love him. I took a deep breath. But I will never compromise my marriage or my boundaries just to protect his career. He actually thinks Nate owed him a report about the patent. Nate didn't owe him a single piece of information about his work because Dad never bothered to ask about it for 8 years. Not once. Silence settled over the phone. I know, Rachel said softly. I've been thinking back over the last 3 years. How many times did Dad rudely interrupt Nate at the dinner table? How many times did Nate try to share something about his engineering projects, only for Dad to abruptly change the subject? Every single time, I said. Yeah, every single time. A long pause. Rachel, my tone softened. You don't have to pick sides. You can keep loving Dad, but that doesn't mean you have to turn a blind eye to what he did. I know, it's just really hard. Before hanging up, Rachel suddenly added, one more thing. Catherine Rowland asked me for your email address. Who's Catherine Rowland? A senior partner at the firm, heads the healthcare consulting division. She was at the dinner that night. She said she wanted to reach out to you. I haven't given her your email yet. Do you think I should? Friday, March 21st at 3:42 p.m. An email from Catherine Rowland landed quietly in my inbox. Dear Anna, I hope you don't mind me getting your contact information through Rachel. I'm Catherine Rowland, a senior partner at Hartfield & Klein. I attended your father's celebration dinner last Saturday, and I'm reaching out for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to say that the events of that evening were an eye-opener for all of us. Your father's utter shock and ignorance upon learning that your husband owned the key patent made many of us realize that Lawrence had never spoken of Nathan's work with any degree of respect over the years. That reflects a serious personal shortcoming on your father's part, not a reflection on your family. Second, I want you to know that several partners here hold immense respect for Nathan's unwavering stance on technical safety standards. His insistence on quality oversight is entirely justified. In consulting, people too often sacrifice safety for speed and profit margins. Dealing with someone who refuses to compromise on principles is frankly a breath of fresh air. Your father's colleagues are not carbon copies of your father. A few of us would very much like to meet the woman who stands beside such a principled man. We'd also like to understand why Lawrence never mentioned that his son-in-law was the brilliant Nathan Brooks. If you're ever open to getting coffee, I would welcome the chance to talk. No pressure, no corporate agenda, just genuine professional curiosity. Warm regards, Catherine Rowland. I forwarded the email to Nate. His response came back quickly. Is she playing office politics? I replied, maybe she's being genuine. He messaged back, could be both. I didn't reply to Catherine right away, but I saved the email. It served as proof that not everyone in that world shared my father's narrow snobbery. Even within his own firm, there were people who could see what he was blind to. That same Thursday at 2 p.m. sharp, Nate's phone rang. It was Alexander Hartfield. Real commercial licensing negotiations had officially begun. Saturday, March 22nd, 10 a.m. I walked into the Thinking Cup Cafe on Tremont Street in downtown Boston, a spot sitting right between my house and my father's. On Wednesday, he had texted me, "Can we meet?" "Just Saturday, just the 2 of us, please," I agreed. Not because I expected a sudden change of heart, but because there were things I needed to state clearly to his face. I prepared for the meeting like I was delivering a formal report. Structured, backed by facts, and stripped of raw emotion. I had even created a printed timeline 3 full pages detailing every instance of his condescension toward Nate over the past 3 years, complete with dates, locations, and his exact phrasing as best as I could recall. June 2023, Elizabeth's funeral. The last time Lawrence treated Nate with warmth. August 2023. First family dinner dismissal. November 2023. Orch. Brushing off Nate's commercial hospital work with a cold, that's nice. December 2023. The $50 Home Depot gift card. March 2024. Orch. Rude interruption regarding Nate's MIT engineering degree. Easter 2025. Not a career path worth celebrating. Orch. October 2025. Dismissing Nate's insights on commercial energy efficiency. March 8, 2026. He doesn't belong at a table full of corporate executives. I placed the timeline inside a folder. I also brought my phone loaded with screenshots of his self-centered, demanding text messages. I arrived 10 minutes early. My father was already sitting in a corner booth, looking visibly worn down. Yet I felt no surge of pity. Before I even fully sat down, he blurted out anxiously, "I'm glad you came. We need to talk about what happened." "You mean what you did?" I countered coolly. The muscles in his face tense up. "Anna, I believe there's been a massive misunderstanding between us." "No, there's no misunderstanding. What exists is 8 years of daily contempt for my husband." That's not a misunderstanding. It's a pattern of behavior. I have never shown contempt for Nathan. I have always been polite to him. Politeness and genuine respect are two completely different things. I don't appreciate the tone you're taking with me. He kept his voice down, venting his frustration. And I don't appreciate being told I'm not allowed to decide who comes to my own dinner. My father leaned back in the booth. "You're still angry about the dinner invitation. I am angry about everything that invitation represented." I opened the folder and slid the 3-page timeline across the table to him. "I put this together specifically for you. Take a look." He frowned, scanning the pages. As his eyes moved down the text, his face grew increasingly pale. "What is this?" Evidence. My voice remained calm, surprising even myself. "A documented record of every time you ignored Nate, talked over him, or treated him as an inferior. Dates, locations, and your exact words." "Anna, you're being dramatic. Am I?" "I'm holding 3 pages of concrete examples. These are facts in black and white. This is just your personal overinterpretation." "No, these are your actual actions." 2 other patrons in the cafe glanced in our direction. I hadn't raised my voice, but the weight in my words filled the corner booth completely. Even if I didn't pay enough attention to him in the past, my father stumbled over his defense. "That still doesn't explain why Nathan kept his patent a secret from me. That's on him." He deliberately hid it. That was the exact moment I had prepared for over 3 full days. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Nate didn't tell you about his patent because you never asked it about his work. Not once in 8 years." His mouth opened, but no words came out. "You never asked where he graduated from. You never asked what projects he was leading. You never asked if he took pride in what he built. Based strictly on the title electrician, you made every arrogant assumption possible and decided he wasn't worth a shred of your curiosity. And now, you're sitting here throwing a tantrum because those foolish assumptions made you look like a total fool in front of your senior partners. You're angry because the man you callously excluded from your celebration dinner happens to hold the key to your managing partner title. You're angry simply because you messed up and got exposed publicly. But do you know the one thing you aren't feeling?" I paused, letting every single word land with full weight. "You aren't feeling sorry. You aren't apologizing for ignoring him for 8 years. You aren't acknowledging that you treated my husband like an afterthought. You're just upset that your own behavior finally cost you something." My father tried to cut in, but I didn't give him the floor. "I came here today, holding on to one last shred of hope that you might recognize what you've done. That you'd see how you twisted the grief of losing Mom into cruelty toward others and offer a genuine apology. But you can't do it, can you? You're completely blind to your own arrogance." "I am not cruel," he said through gritted teeth. "All my life I have. You have been blind. You divide people into categories, useful or useless, impressive or embarrassing. You stopped seeing Nate as a person a long time ago. And you stopped seeing me as an independent person too. I'm just a reflection of your ideal image. So what do you want from me? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. Happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear? I stood up from the booth. That's not an apology. Orch. That's just a tactic to force an end to this conversation. Anna, what exactly do you want me to say? I wanted you to feel genuine remorse, but you don't. You aren't sad about hurting Nate. You aren't sad about ignoring him for 8 years. You're only sad that this ruined your promotion. That isn't fair. He completely lost his usual composure. Orch. Forcing me to choose between your approval and Nate's dignity wasn't fair either. But you forced the choice anyway. And now I've made my decision. My father's face contorted with anger and humiliation. So this is it. You're going to cut ties with your own father over this? I pulled a $5 bill from my purse and pressed it onto the table next to the untouched cup of coffee. Orch. I'm simply setting a boundary. If you can't respect my husband, you don't get access to my life. When you're ready to offer a real apology, not because you need me to bail you out, but because you actually realize how badly you messed up, that's when you can call me. Until then, we have nothing left to talk about. Orch. I picked up my folder, turned around, and walked out of the cafe without looking back once. I got into my car and sat in the driver's seat for 2 minutes, taking deep breaths of the crisp Boston air. Then I started the engine and drove home. It was 10:23 a.m. The confrontation had lasted just 23 minutes. When I pulled into the driveway, Nate was tinkering with something in the garage. Orch. Seeing the look on my face, he set his tools down. How did it go? He asked. I'm done waiting for him to change. My eyes welled up with tears. Nate walked over and wrapped his arms tightly around me. We stood there in the garage for 5 solid minutes without saying a word. Sometimes that's all it takes. Monday, March 24th. Orch. Rachel went straight over to my father's house without giving him a heads up. She called me afterward. I gave Dad a piece of my mind. Literally yelled right to his face. My hands are still shaking. What did you say to him? I asked, taken aback. I told him that he brought every bit of this on himself. Orch. That his complete lack of respect for Nate caused this entire disaster. And that I refused to play along with his I'm the victim act. Rachel, you didn't have to do that for me. No, I had to. For 3 years, I've watched him treat Nate like he's worthless, and I kept telling myself it wasn't my place to step in. Orch. But after Saturday, and after seeing the timeline you put together, I realized that staying quiet just made me complicit in his arrogance. How'd he take it? He tried to turn it back on me, accusing me of taking sides and throwing family out the window. I told him I was choosing basic respect. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I was scared, but I'm okay. Scared of what? Orch. Scared he'd shut me out too. Scared I'd lose him, the same way you did. Rachel. My voice softened. You haven't lost me. I've always been right here. I know, it's just, Mom is gone. If I lose Dad too, you aren't losing him. You're just changing the way you allow him to treat you. Before we hung up, Rachel took a long, deep breath. I set up an appointment with a therapist. Orch. First session is April 2nd. I was quiet for a second, then smiled. I'm so proud of you. Wednesday, March 25th, 2 p.m. Nate spent 90 minutes on the phone with Alexander Hatfield. When he hung up, he walked downstairs to where I was working. It's done, he said. Alexander just sent over the final contract. I'm sending it to legal now. What are the terms? Everything I asked for. Orch. A $580,000 upfront licensing fee, landing in our account within 10 business days. A $125,000 annual royalty for the length of the Atlantic Retail Group contract, guaranteed for 3 years minimum. The safety protocols are baked in as non-negotiable terms. Installers have to hold a Massachusetts Master Electrician license and complete my 8-hour safety course. Orch. Plus oversight. I get to conduct quarterly safety audits, and if I find code violations, I have the right to pull the license on the spot. My eyes widened. He agreed to all of that? Every bit of it. He told me on the phone, We should have listened to you back in July. It would have saved us 8 months. Arch. I told him it would have saved them a very expensive celebration dinner, too, Nate added, raising an eyebrow. Did he laugh? Did he mention my father? Nope. And I didn't bring him up either. Business is business. Your dad is a whole other issue. Friday, March 27th, 11:47 a.m. Nate signed the licensing agreement via DocuSign. Arch. He held up his phone to show me the confirmation email. First wire hits next Friday. $580,000. I looked at my husband, the man my father had ignored for 8 years. The man who refused to back down on safety standards, even with a massive corporate powerhouse pressing him to fold. Arch. The man who had just pulled off a licensing deal worth more than my father made in a year as a senior partner. How are you feeling right now? I asked, relieved. The tech is actually going to be used the right way. Not even a little bit of petty satisfaction? Anna, wanting revenge means I'd have to care about watching your dad fall. I don't. Arch. I just wanted the engineering done right and kept safe. Now it is. That's who he was. That's who he'd always been. The deeply grounded man my father never even bothered to look at. Thursday, March 26th. I had my first therapy session. Dr. Sarah Winters, 52 years old, was the type to get straight to the point without wasting time on small talk. What brings you in today? Arch. 2 weeks ago, I cut ties with my father. My head tells me it was the right move, but emotionally, I feel completely untethered. Walk me through what happened. I laid out the whole story. The dinner, the deliberate exclusion, the video footage, the confrontation at the coffee shop, and how I finally walked out. She listened quietly the entire time without interrupting. Arch. So, what are you hoping to get out of therapy? I want to stop waiting for him to apologize.
Are you still waiting?
I hesitated. Part of me is. Even though I know in my gut it's never going to happen. That's what we need to unpack, Dr. Winters said. That part of you is still holding out hope for a father who simply doesn't exist. You're waiting for the father you needed him to be. Arch. My eyes stung with tears. She spoke gently. You aren't just processing his absence from your life today. You're grieving the ideal father he never was in the first place. That's usually the hardest part, because grieving something you never truly had can make you feel like you're making a big deal out of nothing. Everyone makes it sound like I overreacted. Arch. It's not like he was putting hands on me. He wasn't some total monster. Years of cold dismissal is its own kind of deep emotional damage, especially coming from a parent. So, I'm not crazy. You aren't crazy. You're hurting, and you have every right to protect yourself from someone who keeps causing that pain, even if that person happens to be your father. Arch. For the first time, I heard that validation from someone outside my marriage. From a professional whose entire job was seeing things as they really are. As we wrapped up, she asked, "Same time next week?" "Yes," I replied. That was my first real commitment to long-term healing. Arch. The first time I acknowledged that this wasn't just a quick choice I had made, but a deep emotional scar that needed real care. Saturday, March 28th. I met Catherine Rowland for coffee. She suggested Thinking Cup, the exact place where I had confronted my father 6 days earlier. I wanted to meet here, she said as we sat by the window, because I want you to take this space back. Arch, your last memory of this spot shouldn't just be your father refusing to take responsibility. I was caught off guard by her bluntness. You know about what happened that day? Rachel mentioned a few details. Honestly, it's classic Lawrence. He's never known how to say he's wrong, even in the office. How long have you worked with him? 15 years. Arch. He's brilliant with clients, but a total train wreck when it comes to personal relationships. Your mother used to be the bridge between his cold logic and real human connection. When she passed, that bridge completely caved in. She looked me dead in the eye. I didn't come here to make excuses for him. I came because of what I saw at that dinner. Arch. I felt deeply ashamed. Not for you, but for those of us sitting at that table as senior partners. For years, we watched Lawrence brush off anyone who didn't fit his definition of success, and not one of us ever called him out on it. Why didn't you? Because he brought in massive business. Because office politics are messy. Because turning a blind eye is always the easiest route. She paused. George, I'm sorry. You deserved far more respect from the people in your father's orbit. You aren't responsible for his choices. No, but I am responsible for my own silence. We talked for 45 minutes. Catherine wasn't trying to play peacemaker between my father and me. George. Instead, she offered Rachel and me real professional guidance, completely separate from my father's influence. A fresh start on our own terms. As we got up to leave, she added, "Your husband was 100% right to hold the line on those safety standards. We should have listened to him back in July. I'm glad he didn't back down." George, it made things complicated, sure, but that kind of pushback shows real integrity. Before walking away, she said, "I'm hosting a small get-together at my place next month. Just a quiet dinner on April 20th. Would you and Nate like to come?" I invited Rachel too. Who else will be there? Just people I genuinely like, none of the corporate climbers. George. I told her I'd check with Nate, but deep down, I already knew he'd say yes. Sunday, March 30th, 2026, 3 p.m. As for that trashy tabloid story, she added with a careless wave of her hand, of course we completely made up that nonsense about Leo stealing the algorithm. Howard doesn't even know how to power on a modern computer, let alone write source code for a supply chain network. George. We cooked up those insane lies out of thin air just to tank his stock price. We knew that throwing his $50 million company into jeopardy was the only leverage we had to force you to cover our debts. You drove us to this, Felicity. We needed that $8 million to pay off those defaulted commercial loans and save this gallery launch. We simply did what was necessary to protect the family. George, you're just paying the price for your own stubbornness and disloyalty. Ashley stepped away from the heavy wooden door and walked toward the mahogany table. She looked down at me, her face twisted with pure disgust. Sign it right now, Felicity, she demanded. You owe me this. You ruined my life when you walked away from this family. George, now you're going to fund my boutique and fix my trashed credit score. Sign the wire transfer authorization so I can get back downstairs and enjoy my launch party. I looked at the three of them. My father, a deliberate fraud. My mother, a ruthless extortionist. My sister, a greedy accomplice. I had every single word on tape, crystal clear. George. They had arrogantly laid out admissions to federal bank fraud, massive identity theft, intentional extortion, and a coordinated character assassination campaign, all dumped out in under 3 minutes. This long, painful performance was finally over. I picked up the heavy gold pen. I didn't sign the paper. Instead, I sat up straight, my trembling stopping instantly. George, I wiped the tears from my face, looked them dead in the eye, and spoke clearly. The deal is closed. My father stared at me for a split second before a loud, booming laugh burst from his chest. Completely drunk on his own sense of power, he leaned back in his leather chair, looking at me with smug satisfaction. He thought my words were a total surrender. For a second, nobody moved. George. Howard kept chuckling, misunderstanding what I meant, though the smile faded from his eyes. I let the silence hang until Ashley shifted uncomfortably near the door. Their own words seemed to echo in the room. The forged signatures, the stolen loans, the fabricated tabloid hits. So explicit that no defense attorney could ever spin them away. George, I didn't even need to accuse them or summarize what they'd done. They had enthusiastically handed over every single incriminating detail all on their own. My gaze moved from Howard to Beverly, and then to Ashley, letting them see clearly that the fear they had been feeding on was completely gone. Howard's smile finally froze. George. His eyes dropped to the unsigned documents, starting to realize that the deal is closed didn't mean I was agreeing to their demands. It meant the trap had sprung shut. Then, I picked up the fraudulent non-disclosure agreement and the $8 million wire transfer form. My father narrowed his eyes, a flicker of panic breaking through his arrogant mask. "George, what are you doing?" he demanded, his voice losing its booming confidence. "Sign the paper, Felicity. We don't have time for your dramatic games." I didn't answer. I just gripped the thick cream paper with both hands and calmly ripped it down the middle. I tore it again and again, methodically shredding their extortion demands into useless scraps. "George." I opened my fingers and watched the pieces flutter down onto the expensive tabletop like confetti. My mother let out a sharp screech. "Have you lost your mind?" she screamed, slamming her hands onto the wood. "We will destroy him. We'll call the press right now and paint Leo as a criminal. We'll make sure his company stock plummets to absolute zero by Monday morning." "George, you just ruined your entire life, you ungrateful little brat." Ashley shoved the door wide open, her face flushed with sudden rage. "You can't do this to me," she yelled, storming toward the table. "My boutique is going under. You have to clear that loan. You promised you would. You said the deal is closed." I looked at my sister and let a slow, cold smile spread across my face. "George." "The deal is closed," I repeated, my voice steady and absolute. "Just not with you." I reached up and pointed to the sparkling diamond brooch pinned to the lapel of my navy silk gown. It looked like a piece of fine jewelry, but its real purpose was hidden just beneath the gems. "George." The military-grade microphone was working perfectly, transmitting every sound directly to a secure server parked a block away. "There's something really interesting about Leo's software. Data transfers instantly," I said calmly, watching my father's eyes widen with sudden dread. "Federal investigators have been listening to every single word spoken in this room in real time." "George." The color drained from my father's face. His jaw dropped, his skin turning a sickly gray. He stared at the diamond brooch on my dress as if it were a venomous snake. "What did you just say?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I said the FBI has been listening the entire time," I replied. "My company counsel is sitting right now with a team of federal agents just a block away. George, they have a full recording of your confessions to bank fraud, identity theft, extortion, and a coordinated financial smear campaign. We needed a verified verbal confession to bypass a drawn-out civil trial, and you all just eagerly handed it to us on a silver platter." My mother stumbled backward, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "George." She slapped her trembling hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. "No!" she gasped, shaking her head wildly. "No, you're lying. You're bluffing. You would never send your own parents to federal prison." "You stopped being my family 8 years ago on October 12th, I reminded her. "The day you threw me out and called me worthless. You stole my name. George. You forged my signature to finance a fake luxury store. You tried to pull my daughter out of her middle school, and you tried to ruin my husband's life's work." Ashley let out a sharp, hysterical wail. She scrambled backward, pressing herself hard against the boardroom's thick glass wall. "Mom, what do we do?" she cried, her voice cracking. "Make her stop. Tell them to go away." "George, I can't go to jail." My father bolted upright from his chair, his chest heaving as panic finally crushed his arrogance. "Felicity, please," he begged, throwing his hands out in desperate plea. "We can fix this. We'll call the bank on Monday and pull your name off the commercial loan. We'll issue a public apology to Leo. Please, don't do this to us." "George." I slowly stood up, smoothing the silk of my custom dress. I looked down at the shredded extortion papers scattered across the table. For 8 years, I had allowed their cruel words to define my worth. But standing here now, watching them grovel and plead, I felt nothing but a deep, liberating sense of peace. "It's too late for apologies, Dad," I said quietly. "George, you made your choices, and now you're going to face the consequences of every single one of them. Your boutique is done, Ashley. Your reputation is toast, Mom. And you can prepare for a federal holding cell, Dad. The game is over." Before my father could pitch another bargain, a heavy, authoritative knock echoed against the VIP room door. "George." The sound instantly cut off Beverly's hyperventilating and Ashley's panicked sobbing. Before anyone inside could move, the electronic lock clicked open from the outside, and the heavy door swung wide. Bradley walked in first, his face set like ice. Right behind him were 4 FBI agents in dark windbreakers, the yellow letters FBI standing out clearly across their chests. 2 uniformed NYPD officers stepped in behind them, completely blocking the only exit. The air in the soundproof room felt instantly sucked out. My father stumbled back, bumping into his chair. "What is the meaning of this?" he protested. "You can't just barge into a private event." The lead agent stepped past Bradley, ignoring my father entirely. "Howard Sterling," she stated, her voice carrying total authority. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit federal bank fraud, identity theft, and interstate extortion." My mother let out a shrill scream. She scrambled away from the table, backing herself up against the glass window. "Howard, do something," she shrieked. "Tell them to leave. People like us don't get arrested." The lead agent didn't even blink. "Beverly Sterling and Ashley Sterling," she continued, unclipping heavy stainless steel handcuffs from her belt. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit extortion and accessory to bank fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As the agent began reading the Miranda rights, the reality of the situation hit my sister hard. Ashley looked at the cold steel cuffs and started hyperventilating. "No, no, no," she gasped, clutching her crimson silk dress. "You can't arrest me. My grand opening party is happening right downstairs. The press is down there. You'll ruin my business. I can't be seen in handcuffs." "Which is exactly why you shouldn't have used fraudulent commercial loans to fund it," Bradley said coldly. "Because you threatened to destroy a publicly traded NASDAQ company across state lines using federally backed loans. You triggered federal jurisdiction. Your extortion demands are officially logged, and you just confessed to them on tape. You crossed a federal line, and there's nowhere left to run." Howard tried to straighten his tuxedo jacket, clinging to the last bit of his dignity. "Officers, let's be reasonable here. I know the NYPD commissioner personally. We can sit down with our attorneys on Monday and clear up whatever misunderstanding happened between my daughter and me. I can write a check right now to settle any financial damages. You can't buy your way out of a federal fraud investigation, Mr. Sterling," the lead agent replied, grabbing his arm and pulling his hands firmly behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs, locking around my father's wrists, echoed through the boardroom. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The man who had ruled over me through fear and control, who had stolen my identity, was rendered completely powerless in a single second. When the second agent approached my mother, Beverly completely lost it. She began thrashing around, knocking a crystal water glass off the table and sending it shattering across the floor. "Get off me!" she shrieked as the agent grabbed her wrists. "This was all his idea." She thrust a finger directly at my father. "Howard forged the loan. Howard came up with the smear campaign. I'm just a mother trying to protect her daughter. You have to believe me!" My father stared at his wife with absolute disgust. After decades of keeping up the fake image of a perfect marriage, the second the handcuffs came out, they turned on each other like wild animals. Ashley was sobbing uncontrollably, mascara running down her face in dark streaks. As the agent secured her wrists, she glared at me with pure venom. "You did this to us, Felicity," she wailed. "You're a monster." I stepped away from the shredded papers on the table and looked at my sister. "I didn't force you to steal $2.5 million, Ashley. I didn't force you to threaten my husband. I just stopped playing the victim and let you face the consequences of your own greed." Bradley stepped up beside me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Are you doing okay?" he asked softly. I looked at my family standing there in handcuffs. I had spent 8 long years terrified of their cruelty, but watching them now, I felt nothing. Just a cold, quiet peace. "I'm doing great," I told him. "All right, folks," the lead agent instructed, holding firmly onto my father's arm. "Let's move. Keep it quiet and keep moving." My father's face turned a pale, sickly gray. "You can't take us through the main gallery," he pleaded, his arrogant composure totally shattered. "The city's high society is down there. The press is waiting. Orch, please, take us out through the freight elevator in the back. I'm begging you. Don't destroy my reputation like this." "The freight elevator is currently offline for security reasons," the agent replied flatly. "We take the main stairs. Let's go." The glass doors of the VIP boardroom swung open. 2 officers led the way, followed closely by the FBI agents escorting my parents and sister. Orch. I walked beside Bradley, stepping out onto the grand curved staircase to watch the scene unfold. As the officers hit the upper landing, the crowd mingling in the main hall down below began to notice the commotion. The quiet chatter of wealthy socialites, talking about art, slowly ground to a complete halt. Orch. The live jazz quartet stumbled over their notes, and a saxophonist lowered his instrument in total confusion. Within seconds, the massive opulent ballroom went dead silent. My father was led down the stairs first. He kept his head down and his shoulders hunched, trying desperately to hide his handcuffed wrists. The guests parted like the Red Sea, their faces frozen in absolute shock. Orch. These were the same people who had spent the last 2 hours sipping my family's top-shelf champagne. Now, they were watching Howard Sterling, a supposed pillar of the business community, being paraded out like a common criminal. My mother followed right behind him in her shimmering silver gown, stumbling slightly on the steps. Orch. The dress that had glistened under the spotlights just an hour ago now looked utterly ridiculous. She kept her face turned away from the crowd, but I could hear her muffled, humiliated sobs echoing across the room. Shift to Ashley's walk down the stairs, which delivered the ultimate climax of the night. She was supposed to be the guest of honor, the golden girl, who could do no wrong. Orch. Dressed in her crimson silk gown, she was flanked by federal agents marching right through the center of her own charitable gala. The local reporters and social photographers hired to document her big night instantly realized what was happening. Flashbulbs exploded. What started as a few scattered flashes quickly turned into a blinding wall of light. Click, click, click. Orch. Photographers crowded against the velvet ropes, capturing every angle of my sister's tear-streaked face and ruined mascara. Ashley tried to dodge the cameras, but there was nowhere to hide. The very people she had desperately tried to impress were now sitting front row for her total public ruin. Orch. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching the agents guide them through the double glass doors at the front entrance. Red and blue police lights flashed across the wet pavement and the trampled red carpet outside. Instead of shoving them straight into the cruisers, the agents separated them at 3 different cars to verify identities and finalize the handover paperwork. Orch. Even pressed against the cold metal of the police cars, the last remnants of their family alliance completely disintegrated. The flashing lights cast harsh shadows across their faces. The heavy rain from earlier had left a thin mist in the air, giving the entire scene a surreal feel. Orch. High society guests were still pressed against the gallery's glass doors, eagerly taking in every single second of the spectacle. My family had spent a lifetime building an image of absolute perfection, untouchable wealth, and unwavering loyalty. But in our house, loyalty was always just transactional. It was built on mutual greed and the shared benefit of keeping me as the designated scapegoat. Orch. Now that the target had turned the tables, that fake loyalty vanished in front of federal agents and steel handcuffs. Ashley broke down first, standing by the rear door of the second cruiser, rain ruining her styled hair and soaking her expensive gown. She froze. As an officer placed a hand on her shoulder to guide her into the back seat, she planted her feet on the wet asphalt and jerked away. Orch. She began to scream, her voice sharp with wild panic, cutting through the night air. I didn't do this. It was them. She spun her head toward our parents, who were being processed by the lead car. I had nothing to do with that commercial loan. I just wanted to open a luxury boutique. I was the creative director. Howard and Beverly handled all the finances. They committed the bank fraud. Torch. They forged Felicity's signature. I never signed a single paper. I never even set foot in that bank. They handed me the money and told me it was clean. You can't arrest me for their crimes. The speed of her betrayal was breathtaking. Without a moment's hesitation, my sister threw the parents who had spoiled her entire life straight under the bus. Torch. She was completely ready to watch them spend the rest of their lives in federal prison, if it meant saving her own skin. The onlookers behind the gallery glass let out a collective gasp, stunned to watch the golden girl torch her own parents in public. Howard heard every word of Ashley's panicked speech. Torch. He stopped arguing with the officer holding his arm and whipped around to glare at his favorite daughter. His usual face of bored superiority twisted into a mask of pure rage. The veins in his neck bulged against his stiff tuxedo collar. "You ungrateful little brat!" Howard roared across the short gap between the police cars. "I risked everything to bail out your failing boutique." Torch. "You knew damn well where that $2.5 million came from. You sat there and watched me practice Felicity's signature at the dining room table for 3 straight days. You spent every dime of that stolen cash on imported fabrics and expensive champagne. Now you want to play the innocent victim?" Torch. The agent beside my father tightened his grip, ordering him to keep his voice down and get into the vehicle. But Howard had completely lost it. The man who prided himself on total self-control was having a full meltdown in front of the city's elite. And he wasn't done assigning blame. Torch. If he was going down for federal bank fraud, he was going to make sure he didn't take the fall for the extortion scheme alone. Howard turned his fury toward my mother, who was shivering beside the first cruiser. "Beverly was the mastermind!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the brick walls. "I forged the loan to save the family business, but the extortion was all her idea." Torch. "I never wanted to shake anyone down for $8 million. Beverly drafted that insane contract. She hired the private investigator to dig into Leo's company background. She set up the tabloid story because she wanted a massive retirement fund. She pushed me into it. She told me if we didn't bleed Felicity dry, we'd lose everything. Don't look at me like I'm the criminal. Look at my wife." Torch. "She's the extortionist." The federal agents just kept taking notes, their faces completely neutral. My father was eagerly providing enough verbal testimony in plain daylight to secure convictions for the next decade. He was voluntarily confirming every single detail we had just caught on tape. The shock on my mother's face was total. Torch. Beverly stood frozen by the cruiser, staring at the man she had been married to for nearly 40 years. She had spent her life maintaining the image of the perfect society wife, standing by her powerful husband. Now that same husband was publicly labeling her a criminal mastermind just to save himself. Torch. Meanwhile, the daughter whose interests she always put above mine was crying and denying any involvement in the empire built for her. My mother let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She looked wildly at the crowd behind the gallery doors, catching the eyes of women she played tennis with, and men who attended her dinner parties. Torch. They didn't look at her with respect anymore, only pure, unvarnished disgust. "How dare you?" Beverly screamed, her voice cracking as she tried to lung toward my father, only to be instantly restrained by the female agent. "I did everything for this family. Everything. I protected you, Howard. I covered up all your massive mistakes. And you, Ashley, you selfish, spoiled brat." Torch. "You begged us for that money. You cried and threatened to destroy yourself if we didn't get funding for your stupid store. I'm the only reason either of you still have anything." I stood on the top step, watching the Sterling family completely fall apart in the open air. Leo came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. For 8 years, I thought I was the broken piece in our family. Torch. Their accusations had lingered in my head long after I stopped listening to them. Now, the truth was standing under the police lights, wearing handcuffs and screaming accusations to survive. The officers forced each of them into separate back seats, screaming match to an end. The two cruisers carrying Howard and Beverly pulled away first, clearing the intersection. Ashley's police car remained parked by the curb while the lead agent handled the final paperwork with the local officers. I watched my parents disappear down the street with no sadness and no sense of triumph. Just a feeling of total closure. I turned to Leo. He looked at my face, waiting to see how I was holding up. I squeezed out a tired smile and took his hand. We began walking toward our car, expecting the final police vehicle to follow the others within seconds. But just as we turned toward the black Lincoln waiting at the corner, a sudden blinding spotlight flooded the wet asphalt. A fleet of local news vans pulled aggressively into the loading zone, completely blocking the exit route for the last police car. Bradley's anonymous tip to the local media had been timed to perfection. He promised exclusive footage of a prominent local business leader's sudden downfall, and the reporters clearly smelled blood. Journalists clutching microphones and camera operators with long lenses poured out of the vans, their gear reflecting the red and blue flashes of the police lights. Behind the gallery's glass doors, the socialites pressed even closer, consumed by a morbid fascination with the complete destruction of a family they once thought was untouchable. I stopped and let go of Leo's hand, looking over at the police car trapped 20 feet away. Through the rain-slicked back window, I saw Ashley. Her face was illuminated by the relentless flashbulbs of the surrounding paparazzi. She looked like a trapped animal, her eyes wide with panic, her perfect makeup completely ruined by tears. She was desperately trying to hide her face behind her handcuffed wrists, but the bright camera lights were merciless. I looked over at Bradley standing a few steps away, looking thoroughly pleased with the media circus he had orchestrated. I gave him a subtle nod. He stepped forward and spoke briefly to the lead agent, who then gestured to the officer driving Ashley's car. The officer rolled the back window down a few inches, letting the chilly night air fill the back seat. Exactly 2 weeks had passed since the dinner that changed everything. Nate and I were hosting a small gathering at our house. Nothing fancy. Just 5 of us total. Rachel arrived first, bringing wine and helping me set the table. Catherine arrived second with a large bouquet of fresh flowers, asking right at the door where she could help out. Jeremy, the quiet electrician crew chief working under Nate, showed up last with dessert. We sat around eating the meal Nate and I made together. Roast chicken, a fresh spring salad, and warm bread from the neighborhood bakery. We talked about work, hobbies, books, and all the normal everyday topics. Catherine shared a hilarious story about a client meeting gone wrong that had everyone laughing out loud. Jeremy complained about a job site where the blueprints didn't match the actual building structure at all, drawing even more laughs. Rachel excitedly shared a new hiking trail she was planning to tackle over the weekend. This was what a real home was supposed to feel like. Not the cold, rigid house I had been trapped in growing up, but the life I had actively chosen to build. At 5:30 p.m., people were chatting in small groups. Rachel and Jeremy were discussing weekend plans. Catherine was helping me clear dishes in the kitchen, while Nate brewed fresh coffee. Catherine looked at me and said softly, "This is wonderful, what you two have built here." I looked around. It's just a simple dinner. No, this is family. Not the family you were handed by birth, but the family you built by choice. My eyes suddenly stung with heat. Is it really okay to feel this light and happy just 2 weeks after cutting ties with my own father? Of course it's okay. Relief and joy can easily coexist with guilt. I kept waiting for the guilt to completely consume me. It won't. Catherine smiled gently, resting her hand on my arm. Because you didn't do this to hurt him. You did this to save yourself. The guests left at 6:45 p.m. Rachel wrapped her arms around me at the front door and whispered, "Thank you for showing me what a real boundary looks like. You held yours, and you taught me how to stand my ground too." 7 p.m. Everyone was gone. Nate and I were clearing away the aftermath, dishes piled in the sink, leftovers packed into containers, and unwashed stemware lined up on the counter. It was that peaceful, quiet calm that follows a perfect day. "Today was great," Nate said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Yeah, Catherine is wonderful. I really like her." "Me too. Honestly, she caught me off guard in the best way." Orch. He dried a wine glass and placed it back in the cabinet. "2 weeks ago, you walked out of that coffee shop not even knowing if you'd ever speak to your dad again. I still don't know if I ever will. How are you feeling right now?" I took a quiet moment to listen to what was going on inside. A little sad. But I know I didn't do anything wrong. Orch. I guess those two feelings can exist at the same time. "I know." He paused for a beat. "How was your therapy session on Thursday?" "It was heavy, but really good. The therapist told me I'm actually grieving the father I desperately needed him to be. That makes a lot of sense." Orch. She also said that stepping away from someone to protect yourself from harm is completely acceptable, even if that person happens to be your parent. That's the truth. I just needed to hear it from someone who wasn't you. Not because I don't trust you, but because you love me and she doesn't. She can see things far more objectively than we can. I get it. I looked around our kitchen. Porch. It was clean now, leaving just the two of us finishing our last glasses of red wine. Outside, the late March night was settling over the streets of Boston, but under this roof it felt completely warm. 2 weeks ago, I was agonizing over whether I had made a massive mistake, and now, I fell silent for a moment before saying, "Now I know I made the right choice." Porch. Not because it feels good to see my dad knocked down, but because I can finally stop waiting for him to see me. Nate set his glass down and pulled me into a hug. "That's healing," he said. I rested my head against his shoulder. "At least, it's the start of it." In that moment, I saw everything with complete clarity. Lawrence hadn't changed. Porch. He probably wouldn't apologize for the rest of his life. Our relationship as father and daughter might be closed for good. Rachel was figuring out her own path, building her own boundaries. Therapy was going to be a long journey. Grief would still roll in like unpredictable tides. Healing is never a straight line from start to finish. Porch. But I also knew this with absolute certainty. I drew a line in the sand, and I stood my ground. Nate signed an incredible licensing deal without sacrificing a single shred of his personal dignity or technical integrity. Catherine offered a genuine friendship with no strings attached. Rachel courageously stood up to Lawrence. And our kitchen had just been filled with a family of our own choosing. Porch. I didn't need my father's validation to prove I deserved a good life anymore. The healing had already begun. It was March 30th, 2026 at 7:30 p.m. 2 weeks since that dinner. 2 weeks since that video surfaced. 2 weeks since I chose myself. My phone lay quietly on the counter. The screen was black. No notifications from Lawrence. No apologies. No answer at all. And I didn't care anymore. Porch. I wasn't staring at the screen waiting for it to light up. This was the real ending. Not some picture-perfect reconciliation, and not a dramatic act of revenge. Just me, finally free, finally able to stop waiting for a father who was never going to show up. This was healing, or at least, the beginning of it. And that was more than enough.